This is the IBJ Podcast for the week of June 30th, 2025, brought to you by Taft. I'm your host, Mason King. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Faithful listeners of the podcast might have picked up that I'm a member of Generation X, somewhere in my mid to late 50s. A latchkey kid with divorced parents who has been steadily employed since the age of 9. I like to think of myself as OG Generation X. Coming after the baby boomers, we're known as the forgotten generation, the self-reliant generation, and perhaps the last free-range generation. And today, you certainly could argue that we're becoming the financial panic generation. We hit the workforce right around the time pensions gave way to 401k accounts with self-directed invested assets. And from our early 20s, we've experienced market crashes in 1987, 1989, and the early 1990s, the dot-com bubble of 2000, the Great Recession in 2008, the flash crash in 2010, the massive sell-off in 2015, the extended pandemic downturn in the early 2020s, and the tariff dip earlier this year. But those should not be excuses for being unprepared for retirement. In fact, economists say that downturns are good opportunities for setting the stage for future growth. Recent studies indicate that Gen Xers who have retirement accounts have saved on average somewhere in the neighborhood of $180,000. That is well below the $1 million popularly seen as the minimum requirement for beginning a comfortable retirement. Of course, the ability to sustain income in retirement depends a lot on your spending habits and the quality of life you try to pursue. It's probably not a surprise that IBJ reporters and editors talk a lot about personal finance here in the office. And we've been compiling a list of issues on which we feel we lack a firm grip, in particular those facing Gen Xers. For example, when is the best time to start taking Social Security, especially given that it's headed for a funding deficit early next decade? What actually do you do with your 401k funds once you retire? And what should you start doing today if you're among the nearly 50% of Gen Xers who don't have a retirement plan? That figure comes from the asset management firm Schroders. To answer these questions and many more, I have enlisted IBJ personal finance columnist Peter Dunn, a.k.a. Pete the Planner. Here's our conversation. It's my pleasure to welcome to the podcast Peter Dunn, a.k.a. Pete the Planner. Pete, how was your summer so far?
So far, so good. I haven't melted yet.
I lost the HVAC in my house.
Oh.
So staying with my mom.
Well, I know you wanted to drop a random $4,000 or $5,000 to fix that, so I'm sure that's a good time at the King household.
I actually, as we speak, the repairman is there, so I'll be getting the good news, I'm sure, here in an hour or so.
I'll make sure I'm clear of you by then.
Thank you, sir. Speaking of financial problem, so one of my colleagues at IBJ had her in-office retirement party yesterday.
Oh.
Yeah, and that got a few of us who are close-ish to retirement thinking about what exactly we're supposed to be doing right now about retirement. And we're not dumb. I mean, we work for a journalism publication that covers business, I understand. And but we still were unsure about some things. Now, in general, my buddies and I are Gen Xers by definition between 45 and 60, although on the whole, we're closer to 60. I did a little bit of research. I was a bit surprised to learn that Gen Xers account for roughly 64 million Americans, or 20% of the country's population. You know, for a generation that has always been called the forgotten generation, or, you know, the latchkey generation, I felt a little bit more empowered.
Yeah, that's a bit of a surprising number. Well, I think what's shocking, at least in the retirement business on some level, I always think of the age 59 and a half. That's because that's when people can access, some retirement accounts without penalties. And the idea that Gen X is officially 59 and a half, it's kind of crazy, Mason.
So upon doing a little bit more research, I was surprised to learn that the median 401k balance, the median for Gen Xers is about, you want to guess?
Yes, I do.
What do you
I
got?
was hoping I was hoping you would not take that opportunity away from me.
Go, man.
All right, I'm gonna go $473,000.
Is that a joke?
Oh, I don't know. What is it?
It's 1/10 of that.
It-
It's $45,000.
no way.
It's
No way.
that's the median. The
Oh,
average amount saved for Gen Xers who have retirement accounts is more 175,000 ish.
okay. So 2 points to consider here. Number
Yeah.
one, clearly your boy confused median and average like a rookie. We're recording on a Thursday. I'm out of information on Wednesday, so that's a problem.
Okay.
Number two, this is problematic, Gen X. If you're on the younger side of Gen X, okay, you got some time there. But if you're 60, Mason, it seems like we're gonna have to spend some time today of like, what do you do if you got 170 grand and you're 60 and you're gonna be retiring in the next 10 years? It seems like a pretty good topic.
Yeah, we're going to get there. I read in a few places that the generally accepted figure for how much Gen Xers will need in order to start retirement is between 1 million and 1.5 million. Does that seem like it's in the right ballpark?
Yeah, those are always weird for me because you can probably get away with that in Central Indiana. If we're in Huntington Beach, California, which is oddly specific as an example, you're toast. No way. You can get away with it here, maybe Peoria, Illinois, some like financial places, if you will.
There's a lot of skepticism among members of the generation about ability to retire. I assumed that everybody in my coworker cohort was fairly well along in retirement, like they had saved at least a few multiples of their annual salaries by this point. One of them admitted that they basically had started saving 4 or 5 years ago. So, can we address first what Gen Xers who are just getting started saving need to be doing to put themselves in the best possible position ASAP?
I love this topic, and if I may, I'm going to start here. If you're just getting started, or you haven't even gotten started, there's no shame in that. Like, you're not going to get the resolution you want by feeling deeply shamed by the fact that you probably should have started sooner. Yes, you should have started sooner, but we're here. So there's two ways to think about this. Mason, this is how my brain works. There's two very specific ways. Number one, if you're going to retire in, let's call it 10 years, we'll just use this as a marker, a rule of thumb, if you will. If you're going to retire in 10 years, then it is likely, if you're invested, getting normal market returns and you're putting the right amount in, that you will have twice the number of assets 10 years from now than you have right now. So we will pause and absorb that here for a second. So if you've got 170 grand right now, it is likely you'll have at least $340,000 in the year 2035 for a retirement nest egg.
Right. If I am saving it in the correct fashion.
Yeah, I mean, if you're putting money away, if you're in, we'll call, a 1 on the beta scale, which we could get into that if you really wanted to, but we'll say basically you're getting S&P market returns. But some of the challenge with this, if you're late to the game, it's likely that you're a novice investor. You may not be properly allocated. But if you choose to use a target date fund, which I know we're talking a little bit about later, 10 years from now, your balance should be double. What's really fascinating about that, if you back it up for a second here, let's say that you are 55 years old and you have saved 1 million American dollars. Okay. The number doesn't matter. It's the concept. And on some level, you're saying, okay, over the last 33 years of my adult life, your working years, you were able to scrap together $1 million or $100,000. And you're thinking, okay, it took me 33 years to accumulate whatever you have at age 55. And then some person like me, whose head is shaped like an egg, says, well, in the next 10 years, you're actually going to have that exact same amount of money twice over. That's a mind-blowing concept, but that's also how compounding interest works.
Got it. Okay.
I had a second point.
Please go. Please do.
The second point, and it should be the overarching philosophy of anyone over 50 who is behind the eight ball. And it's this: the key to a successful retirement for you is not that you're going to have a lot of money, because you're not. The key is to put yourself in a position where you will not need a lot of money. And I know that's a cute turn of phrase, arguably cute, but it's the truest thing in the world, especially when you live in a relatively low cost of living area like the Midwest.
It's all about budgeting. If you want to,
yeah, I would say it slightly differently. I would say it's about obligation elimination, which oddly was a garage band I was in sixth grade. Obligation elimination. We were good. But if you think about it, for 30 years, I know this is true for me, and I'm likely true for you. You've just accumulated obligations as an adult. You get this bill, you add this bill, this priority shifts, but you don't change the other one that you were prioritizing prior to that. And then you've got 20, 25 monthly obligations, including debts. And so the goal is to wind down those obligations, especially your debts, so you actually need less money when you have less money.
Okay. All right. And we're going to get to debts for a second. I wanted to jump to an assumption. Let's assume that the folks who are listening to this podcast have access to a workplace retirement plan. I am fairly certain that if you are, is it above 50? You can contribute more to the plan than folks who are younger than you are. It could be like an extra 7,500, I believe, beyond the standard limit.
Yeah, you can do what's called a catch-up contribution. But, there's some give and take here. If you can do it, you absolutely do it. I mean, but if you're behind the eight ball, how many times am I going to say that idiom? Hopefully no more, because that's twice. I've used it up for the year. So if you're in not the best position, what are the chances that you got an extra $7,500 a year laying around, right? So yes, the catch-up contribution's lovely. How realistic is it for people that are struggling? Not that realistic, so I don't know how helpful.
Okay, let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. This is the IBJ Podcast.
Taft, today's modern law firm. With more than 800 attorneys in 8 primary Midwest markets and the District of Columbia, we provide solutions to the business issues facing middle market and emerging companies alike. We do this through a highly collaborative and inclusive team approach. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
All right, we're back with this week's edition of the IBJ Podcast and my conversation with Pete the Planner about the issues Gen Xers face heading into retirement. Okay, so I've got two choices. I feel like you've just given me two choices. One, do everything I can to retire my debts. Two, save as much money as I can. Which one is more important?
Get rid of your debts, and we're gonna use dumb numbers. It's hopefully you have a stinger, some musical elements that we can go into that says it's time for dumb numbers. Are you ready?
This isn't public radio, okay?
Oh, sorry.
Commercial radio, for that matter.
Yeah, yes, it's okay. So let's use big dumb numbers. Let's say your take-home pay on a monthly basis, what you spend, if you will, or what you have access to spend, is $4,000. Okay. Don't get caught up in it, because we're just going to use percentages here. And then let's say that your mortgage payment is $1,000. So it is 25% of your discretionary income, or your income that you have access to. Are we tracking so far?
Yeah.
Okay. If your retirement income isn't going to be able to recreate your $4,000 a month, or that's a very real concern of yours, then it makes sense, while you are earning that $4,000 a month, to lessen the obligation you will eventually have. And so what I'm saying is, in a perfect world, you're ensuring that the day you retire, or within range, that you have made the right amount of mortgage payments. You've budgeted during those pre-retirement years so that you'd vanquish that mortgage and reduce your monthly obligations by 25%. Therefore, by definition, you only need 75% of the income that you needed as a working person. And Mason, I'll tell you, that is the great makeup shot of all time. Like it is a great thing for people to do who are struggling.
Now, the buddy who sits next to me and I were thinking about our mortgages, and we're both well employed. We have emergency funds. We're doing fine. At least for the foreseeable future, we're going to have income. And he was asking, I'm getting close to extinguishing my mortgage. But it's at a relatively small interest rate. Can I just go ahead and just pay off the rest of my mortgage just to get that out of the way, so I'm not paying $1,000 a month for my mortgage?
No, I do not recommend that. Now, it wouldn't be the end of the world if that person did that, but I would not do that. Number one, the interest rate thing is a very legitimate reason to not do that. Like I have a 2.5% mortgage. I'm not in a hurry to get rid of my best asset, which is a 2.5% mortgage. I think it's a little different than that. What I want people to do is I want them to reduce their spending of this hypothetical $4,000 a month they have access to, so that it reduces your lifestyle on a multi-year basis. So if my payment's $1,000, Mason, and I need to crank it to $1,300 to have it taken care of by the time I retire, I've just reduced my income or need by an additional $300 a month. So then when I retire, not only do I only need $3,000 a month, I only need $2,700 a month to survive. So the glory of this is not getting rid of the mortgage. It's the discipline it takes to use income to solve that problem in a more aggressive way. That's where it pays off.
Because I really, really want to pay off my mortgage and just get rid of it, just so I don't have that weighing over me. And I think we probably have 5 years left. But I'm like you. I think we're at about 2.75%.
Well, without getting too much into your details, but I would, if you want to say your Social Security number, that'd be great. How many more years are left on your mortgage? You don't plan on retiring in the next 5 years, right?
Sadly, no.
Okay, well, that's sad. I mean, I still got to have someone to talk to every once in a while, so that's good for me.
Nobody's a reflect.
You're not in a hurry. There's no conceivable reason to make that move. And if you want to get at interest rates, we can. Money markets right now are still paying north of 4%, and your mortgage is 2.75. So to get rid of 2.75 obligation, that's bad math, brother.
Mm-hmm. I get it.
I get it too, though. Like I remember years ago, my father-in-law had us over for dinner. And stop me if I've told you this story. Had us over for dinner, and he was like really excited. And he's not a very excitable person, but he's very excited. And after dinner, he sounded like, "Can we raise our glass?" And I'm like, "Okay, well, can you refill?" And he said, "Hey, I just paid off our mortgage." And I was so excited because I'm a nerd. And my mother-in-law and my wife were not that excited. But in that moment, I was like, man, I really aspire to actually own my home. What an accomplishment. And I think anyone in Gen X, as you look at retirement and you are a mortgage, you have a mortgage, you're a homeowner, you got to look at your mortgage as its role in your retirement success as quickly as anything else. I know we're here to talk about assets and generating income in retirement, but I'll tell you, if you are behind your obligations as it relates to retirement savings, your mortgage is the key to this working.
All right, let's say that I have some money to sock away in my workplace retirement plan. I get a nice little match from my employer, but I'm thinking, man, I need to make up ground fast. So should I try to get an age appropriate investment? Where there's kind of little to medium risk, or can I try to strike gold and go for something high risk?
Don't invest outside of your risk tolerance and knowledge base. Again, if you are behind where you need to be behind or where you need to be in terms of retirement, it's likely that you're not an expert investor. And so even your perception of what is good risk and bad risk is going to be different than someone that knows what they're doing. I like to think of it this way. You're late for a party. How much are you willing to speed? If you're really trying to get there in time, or you're really going to go 110 miles an hour on the new variable speed 465? Probably not. So you probably shouldn't do that investment wise. And that's where crypto is as dangerous as anything. We like to talk about how it's dangerous for 20 somethings that don't know what they're doing. It's actually more dangerous for 50 somethings that don't know what they're doing because they have a lot more to risk.
Got it. Okay, I've got a question here about retirement savings accounts. As you alluded to before, many people have accounts with target dates where generally expected to be the year that you expect to retire. So, for example, I have a target date fund for 2035. And when you first get these funds, they start off fairly aggressive and they take some risks. Then as you age, they become more conservative so you can lock in some of your gains. That's all fine with me. Now, that is usually where the conversation stops when you're getting the annual presentation from the 401k provider. Nobody talks about what happens after 2035. What am I supposed to do with these funds in that account after I hit the target date? Do I just walk out of here with a big bag of money? It seems like no one has prepared me for what to do next.
That's a great question, because when you're talking to the retirement plan person at work, or even thinking about your 401k or whatever you might have, we are all in that moment in what's called the accumulation phase. You're not even thinking about the distribution phase. You're just like, I need more. I need more. I'll worry about what to do with it later, right? And so when you retire, that is the distribution phase. And the rules are a little bit different. There are no actual rules. How about I'll just say this, the mindset has to be a little bit different. And you can leave it in that 2035 fund. I mean, it could be the year 2047, and your money will be arguably appropriately allocated in that 2035 fund, and you'll be perfectly fine, because it's on what's called a glide path. Okay, so the glide path is the percentages and how they shift of a target date fund. So I'm making up numbers. Let's say it's 2025. That is not a made up number, but let's say it is in fact 2025. 70% equities, 30% stocks within your target date fund. That is a made up number. By the time you get to 2035, buddy, it ain't 70-30. It's probably 40-60 or something like that, right? And so that is going to be appropriate to make sure you don't take too much risk as you get closer to post-retirement, which of course is death. But it's meant to be an all-in-one solution. Now, you can move it, and nothing going to try to convince you to move it, but you'd be perfectly fine to leave it alone.
Okay. So it's really just a question of, how do I withdraw from it?
Yeah, that is the $174,000 question. It is, what rate are you going to take? Now, some people say things like, well, I'll just take the interest. I'll just take the gains in a year. Not the best strategy. Really, it isn't, because if you've got a year and you take that, and then the next year the thing shrinks, you've just created your own sequence of return risk problem, and you're going to regret that. You won't. Here's the other thing about this. The first 2 years of retirement, the mistakes you make, which happen all the time, you don't even know you made the mistake until 10 years later. That's actually the most daunting part of all of this, because you've never been in the distribution phase. All you've ever done is earn income and spend that income. And now you just have this nest egg with arguably no earned income left, no work income left. So everything's different. And if you act the same, you're going to make really weird mistakes that are hard to fix once you figure out you made them.
So I need to have a plan for how much I'm going to spend. A sustainable plan.
think more than anything, if you've ever read my column, which you have because you edit it, is that, in fact, unless you just put it through chat, I don't know what you do.
Come on. I have a high moral fiber, journalistic integrity, and I need to look like I'm busy most of the day.
That's fair. I want people to have a financial advisor for that conversation. If you've never been in the distribution phase of your life, and for at that point, 35, 40 years you've been in the accumulation phase, you're going to be out of that phase and you're going to go to something different. And to think that a person can do it themselves with a little Googling, it's just a bad idea. So you need to talk to someone that facilitates hundreds, if not thousands, of those conversations a year.
Okay. But I'm like, oh, it's going to cost too much. They're going to steal my money.
Well, I don't need to go deep into the myopic nature of that thinking. Also, I'm not a financial advisor, so I'm not saying call me. Call someone else that knows what they're doing. I just think that's the tough part. And I'm actually writing my column this week about investing properly in your health and longevity. And on some level, there has to be this trade-off between spending money now to save money later. You have to spend money to get good advice so you don't make a mistake later. But I'll tell you, if you try to go cheap and you don't get advice and you're just like, oh, I'm just going to make the mistakes and deal with it, it's a lot more expensive.
Okay, now I've got a related question about target funds. Now, for the benefit of argument, I'm going to assume that I live at least another 20 years. So instead of having all of my investments mature, or my workplace 401k investments mature in 2035, shouldn't I want to have some invested funds set to mature later, like 2040 or 2045? Wouldn't it make sense to keep some of those savings in a target fund for down the road so that they will have an opportunity to grow when I need that money?
Hold on. I'm Googling, how do you tell a podcast host that they're thinking about this wrong? Hold on. Oh, okay. Thank you. Just
That
returned.
is super passive aggressive. Okay.
And me? Whatever. You're thinking about this wrong, Mason. That was the direct approach. That was choice B.
Oh, see, I'm fine.
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, it's leadership for me. You're thinking about this wrong. There's no mature. Clearly, I'm involved. There's no maturity. There's like this. It's not a savings bond, buddy. It's not like your grandma didn't keep this in her pocketbook. Like this is not. There's no maturity of these investments. It is there. There are bonds, but they are held to duration. There are stocks, but they don't expire. So the idea of it is ready for you at 2035, and then once you pass 2035, it's not ready for you. It doesn't really work that way. It is an appropriate risk level, an allocation for you at 2035. And as it becomes 2040, they take that into account, and then they adjust it so it's still good for someone who is retired, yet it's 2040. So it is so common for people to try to get, I'm going to get a little 2020, get a little 25 fund, a little 2045 fund. So they try to diversify with target date funds, which is the absolute worst thing to do, because then your allocation is really wonky in a bad way. So yeah, it doesn't work that way, friend.
Okay, this is a problem because that was my strategy.
You're currently using?
Yeah, I got 2035 and 2040.
What percent?
I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you this. Don't worry about that. Here's what I want you to do. When you go to the returns, for your investments, you're going to see that in the last year, the last 3 years, return from your 2035 to your 2040 fund are marginal at best.
Yeah, it's usually like a 1% difference.
Yeah, it doesn't particularly matter. Now, I know what you're thinking is you're hedging your bet because, well, maybe if I do work till 2040, then I'm set. They're not designed to be diversified. They're designed to be all-in-one solutions. That being said, not everyone should be in a target date fund. If you're not an expert investor or you're not getting advice from an advisor, it's a great place to do all-in-one investing. But if you're getting advice from the outside, they'll diversify you properly. But I'm not going to say no financial advisor would have you diversify with targeted funds. I'm not going to say that because I'm sure there's someone out there doing it, but most would not.
Okay. Yeah, we do have an advisor, and we're happy with our advisor and the advice we're getting. We do have other investments, so hopefully we can limit the damage there.
Well, can I email them and tell them to yell at you for diversifying with target date funds? Send me their information.
My financial advisor is maybe the nicest person in the world. I don't think that's part of her shtick.
Well,
but maybe I need to get somebody to really.
I'd still like to team up on you with her.
Maybe you should call my wife. I think that would be more effective. So many of us at Gen Xers have elderly parents. Some have passed away already. I have a coworker who has inherited a sizable piece of land from a deceased parent, for example, and other people inherit their parents' homes and or cars or jewelry or pieces of art, other assets. My coworker is worried about how to liquidate this big asset in a way that won't ring up a giant tax bill. He wants to limit the capital gains hit from liquidating this asset. But I would assume that other people who have other kinds of assets have the same question.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. There's a lot of different things involved, but they're likely to have what's called stepped up basis from the time their parent passed away. So, right, that's how it works, at least with equities. When someone inherits real estate or some other sort of thing, the cost basis of the property is what's said to be stepped up to its fair market value at the time of the owner's death. Okay, so whenever their parent passed away, that is their basis. So if they sold it the next day, then they don't have a massive capital gain. So I'll give you an example. Let's say your mom's bought a house in 1995 for $100,000. I love round numbers. They just make this so much easier. She passes away in 2025. Okay, so 30 years later, and the home's now worth $400,000. And so you inherit the home, or in this case, your coworker inherited ground. If they're in southern Indiana, they're not even calling it land. They're just saying, I got some ground. Just so you know, that's how that goes. Your basis is 400,000, not 100,000. So if you sell for $405,000, you only owe capital gains tax on $5,000, not $305,000. So the answer to this question is, if the person passed away recently, there's no big deal as it relates to capital gains tax. If it was 20 years ago when they passed away, well, the basis is back to that point. Does that make sense?
It does. Is that the same for equities? If my one of my parents, let's say, has $100,000 in Steel Dynamics stock, they pass away. It is transferred to me. Now, is my basis now whatever it was worth when it was transferred to me?
Oddly specific example of Steel Dynamics.
That's the first one I could think of. I didn't want to say Lily.
Yeah,
you always get in trouble when you say Lily.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, stepped up basis. That's how that works. Now, if the estate is big enough, there can still be, estate tax situations, but that threshold's pretty big. I mean, it's over like $13 million.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, interesting.
Yeah. Look at us. Okay. By the way, I'm not a tax expert. So all of your tax expert listeners who think that I explained that wrong, I'm very sorry. All emails to Mason at his IBJ.com account, please.
Okay. Yeah. Hire a tax attorney. How about that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
I've got another fairly complicated scenario here for you, and I apologize ahead of time. All right. So the latest update for when the Social Security Retirement Trust Fund runs out of money, as they say. So the trust fund balance is zero. So Social Security benefits are paid entirely from the amount of money that's coming in from those of us who are still paying Social Security. that has been moved up to 2033. So unless something is done to better fund Social Security or to decrease expenses, recipients of Social Security will only receive 77% of their expected benefits beginning in 2033. Make sense so far?
Yeah. So it's like, do you take it earlier is the question, I assume, right?
You got it, but I've got it written out, so I'm going to say it. So generally speaking, so you can start claiming Social Security benefits at age 62, but your benefit amount will increase the longer you wait to start collecting benefits. So in my situation, I could start taking benefits in 2029, and I would get 70% of my full retire benefit. Or I could wait until when I reach my full retirement age of 67, and I am eligible to get full retirement benefits. But from what I know right now, it is possible that I will only be getting 77% of my full retirement benefits in 2034 and would have missed out on the benefits that I would have gotten if I had started taking them 5 years earlier. So, yes, you anticipated my question. In what situations does it make sense to start getting Social Security as early as you can for fear of waiting several years and maybe getting reduced benefits?
Well, the cynic in me is going to come out a little bit, which I try to keep under wraps on this show. On my show, it's everywhere, but on your show, I try to be professional.
Thank you.
Uh,
We have a
my
G rating on my show.
Yeah, my show is just a cluster. But anyway, your show is professional. Anyway, look, I have no idea what Washington's going to do with that. Like, and even to begin to guess, how many times have you thought, "Oh, this is what they need to do," and then they're not even close to that? So, I want to just put that out there as I answer your question.
Yeah.
There is a world.
Let me back up real quick. We did talk about this in some detail a few months ago. If people want to go back and listen to that episode. The thing that I will say that is scary about that is that at that time, and again, this was just a few months ago, we were talking about only getting, I think, 83% of the benefits. That number has already now, as a projection, dropped 6% to 77%. And it's been like a few months. And it just makes me more and more skeptical that this problem will ever get finished. Okay. End of my personal story. Go ahead.
No, that's helpful. I think here's one way you can look at that. If you start taking the early distribution and then you save or invest it or apply it towards your financial goals, not your lifestyle, then there's a possibility in which you win. If you take the early amount and you save it or invest it or put it towards your financial goals, which does not include your lifestyle, then it's possible that move will outweigh the situation if you were to get a higher yet reduced amount later. That's the dynamic situation there, is that theoretically 30% higher, but then the thing lowers by 77%. So it's a little bit of a crapshoot. I don't know. If I were in your shoes, if I'm trying to figure out what I would do in that exact same situation, you can make an argument for both. You really can. It just, where you lock in badness is if you take the early payment and then you spend it on a regular basis. That you will lose if you do that. If you're a working person and you choose to take Social Security early because you're afraid it's not going to be around later, don't spend it. Save it or invest it.
Okay. That's good. I love that. That's easy to follow. All right. Next up. A lot of Gen Xers assume that they will need to work part-time after their official retirement, potentially for the rest of their active lives. How much can I make working part-time without affecting my Social Security benefits?
In 2025, if you are under full retirement age, and full retirement age is 67, then you can earn up to $22,000 and change a year without affecting your benefits. Okay, so your work income can be $22,000. If you make more than that, then Social Security will withhold $1 for every $2 you earn above that limit. Like I said, it's a complicated formula, but that's essentially how it works.
Okay.
If
So they'll withhold $1 for every $2 I make over.
Over, right? And if
When
you are
2000.
at if you're at full retirement age in 2025, you can earn up to $59,000 plus in the months before your birthday if you are to reach full retirement age in 2025. Needless to say, it's complicated. If you are above full retirement age for the entire year, you can work and earn any amount with no reduction in benefits.
Really?
But you have to be above full retirement age.
Right. So it'd be 68.
Yes. If you're
68.
68, you can work and they're not going to reduce your benefits.
Right. And somebody says, "Oh my God, I've been CEO for this company for 30 years, and I feel like you've got the right stuff, Mason. I want you to take over." And so I can earn a $250,000 salary at 68, and none of my Social Security is affected.
I'm sorry, I'm still stuck on that. Someone who ran a business for 30 years comes to you to have them take over.
Welcome to my fantasy world. It's full of like amazing windfalls, things that happen to me that, nobody else would ever expect.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here. I'm like, okay, well, if we're going to do that, I have a full head of hair and I'm 6'4". Is this what we're doing?
Thank you for keeping me grounded because my brain goes some weird places sometimes.
No, that's fine. Yes, yes, Mason. In that very likely scenario you've just painted, you won't have a reduction in your Social Security benefits. Congratulations, buddy.
Okay. Wow. That's great. I'm looking forward to that. Quick one about health insurance. This was a question that my buddy next to my cubicle mentioned the other day. So if you drop out of the full-time workforce before you hit Medicare age, which is 65, and therefore you don't have employer-provided health insurance, you have an opportunity to go on COBRA, or you could go to the exchanges and get, are we still calling them Obamacare exchanges?
You can, but you're going to get email.
Okay, sorry. Let's just call them the exchanges. Any feeling about which is the better way to do it?
Typically, again, not my area of expertise, but this is what I have witnessed. COBRA is going to be a little bit more expensive, if not a lot more expensive. And you can only have it for 18 months anyway after parting from your employer. And so once that 18 months is over, then you're going to have to go to the exchange anyway. So if you don't, but you can go right to the exchange right away if you leave a job. Those are your choices. Exchange, because it's a qualifying event. Change in employment is a qualifying event. So you can either go on the exchange or do COBRA. The exchange is a more permanent solution if you're going to be retired or without coverage for a long time before 65. But let's say you're within 13 months, 14 months of turning 65, then some people would just do COBRA and then just go right on to Medicare.
Okay. Great. Here's one that is so dumb, I think I already know the answer to it, but I'm going to ask him because it came up. If I'm, let's say, 55 to 60 and already have a good amount of money saved that would go to my survivors if I pass away, what's the point of continuing to pay term life insurance?
That's not as dumb a question as you think. I think it's a pretty good question. There's a lot of factors on this one, but the concept is this: does your survivor, suffer financially if you pass away? And if so, and it's something you want to spend money to fix, then term life insurance can still make more sense. Can still make some sense.
Mm-hmm.
If they are not impacted financially at all if you pass away from an income perspective, then it matters a little bit less. How create an estate or generational wealth and you feel like term life insurance can help you accomplish that goal, then you can keep it. But on some level, your insurance needs and focus need to shift at that point in your career, and probably looking at long-term care coverage is a more appropriate focus. But it just depends. If you die, is the other person in trouble? And if the answer is no, then you don't need term insurance.
Okay. But I very well may need long-term care insurance.
Yeah, that's a complicated one. Absolutely. It's expensive. And I don't mean that in a some sort of pejorative sense. Like, it's just expensive. And because it's trying to account for a pretty big expense potentially later in life. But yeah, if you got the income to pay for it and you've got the assets to protect, it's a reasonable thing to consider.
Okay. And the last one is as big as the open sky. How do you know when you're financially ready to retire?
Yeah, it really has a lot to do with, will your projected retirement income match your current financial need, right? So big numbers, making $100,000 a year right now, and I only need, but okay, I'm only spending $80,000. Ignore taxes for this example here. But if my projected retirement income will reliably spin off $80,000 a year in perpetuity, and then obviously increase over time a bit, then you should be good to go. Yeah. The other factor in that is something you just mentioned, though. If health insurance comes into play here and you're like, well, I can't get health coverage, or yeah, I can live on 80, but now I've got $2,000 a month in healthcare coverage, and you're actually living on 104,000, not 80, right? So those, you could actually increase your expenses in retirement if you don't have the health care thing taken care of.
Why is it so complicated?
Because it's really, I've said this on your show a million times. The hardest thing you can possibly do is retire successfully. Like, from a financial perspective, it is the hardest thing. And this is really hard to do. People shouldn't panic, but it's really complex.
Okay, so I need to take care of myself. This is a preview, I'm guessing, of your column, so that I have great quality of life until I just drop dead.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that recently. I want at least a decent vessel to enjoy the years in which I'm not working. It's on my mind a lot.
I feel like I just saw a New Yorker cartoon, something to the effect of, the guy retires and then immediately dies.
That's a fear for a lot of people, man.
Yeah, right. Okay, I'm going to go grab some of my anti-depression medication and try to make sense of this podcast.
Well, I also encourage you to go take a look at that target date allocation situation, or at least talk to your financial advisor about it. She'll get you straight.
Oh, God, I thought that was so smart. Darn it.
Oh well.
Okay. Well, I hate to say goodbye, but we need to get on with things. Thank you so much, as always, for helping me understand this.
Yeah. It is my deepest pleasure.
Oh, thank you, sir. My thanks again to Peter Dunn. A quick reminder, his column on personal finance appears regularly in the print edition of IBJ, and you can find several years' worth of his work at IBJ.com. And folks, before you get on with the rest of your week, there are several features in this week's edition of IBJ I want to draw to your attention. First up, it's easy to assume that the goodies at donut shops are made in-house. Newcastle-based Jack's Donuts opened a production facility in 2023 to help shoulder baking for willing franchisees. But Susan Orr reports that some of them weren't happy with the results. Also in this week's issue, Taylor Wooten explains how local hospitality and tourism officials are trying to create more green spaces downtown to make Indy more attractive to visitors. And Daniel Lee explores the shift toward narrow network health plans that aim to help employers control costs. And again, you can find these stories in the latest print edition of IBJ or online at IBJ.com. Now, it is quite a bit easier to access all the latest business news and all of IBJ's data on Central Indiana's business, community, and economy if you're a subscriber. We're running a promotion right now that gives you complete access for $1 per week for 3 months, just to get an idea of how valuable and original our content is. Just go to IBJ.com and click on the subscribe button. And thanks again for making time this week for the IBJ Podcast. I'm Mason King. Hang in there, everybody. We'll be back again next week.